So how do you know David, or David, how do you know Gail?
Through my sister, Gail and her are good friends.
And David was born in Taiwan. I did not know that. I did not know that you were born in Taiwan. I know you're Taiwanese, um, but David's been very active in different forms of marketing technology, and he's hoping to be able to apply those skills to help support fellow conservationists and fellow explorers, use technology to, to get to do what they're doing. And he's very passionate about the ocean and the natural world. So hopefully he'll be able to make that step from what he does for a living into what he's going to do in exploration.
And David, you've been a guest before, right?
Once before, yes, correct.
That's what I thought. Okay. And Tim, did you want to introduce Trevor since you are bringing him along?
I would love to, and I'll get right to that. First of all, I want to say congratulations to Nathan, who's on the call for his Army commission. Anybody who got to see that happen, is a beautiful ceremony, and he is sort of on his way with the Army. So congratulations, Nathan. And Dina, the Roger That conference was amazing. I tuned in for an event it was a scientist talking about the mission to Jupiter, I think. That was one of the most riveting talks I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Absolutely riveting. So lots of great stuff happening with people in this call. But Trevor, yeah, it's great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Trevor's the HQ VP of Research and Education, based in New York, and has extensive fieldwork experience. I was thinking, Trevor, like very extreme environments. You're either like in Siberia in like the blistering cold or hot, or the Caribbean. I think you've been spending some time lately, and he's joining us today. Thank you for squeezing us in before you go back out in the field yourself. And I'm as fascinated, and I'm sure the rest of us are, to hear what you've been up to and where you've been. So thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thanks, Tim. And yeah, it's a real honor to present to the Great Lakes chapter. I'm trying to get more involved with chapters. I just did a flag return with the Hawaii chapter a couple weeks ago, and it was such a great way to connect with explorers, nationally and internationally. So I put together a little talk, not knowing exactly what y'all would be interested in, but I figured I'd cover the gamut of my different projects and expeditions. I know the title is My Last Decade of the Explorers Club, but it won't be a decade long of me talking, I promise. And I'll leave some time at the end just to kind of discuss whatever you're most interested in. And I'll definitely be able to cover some of the nuts and bolts of my position as a VP and all the work that we do in education and grants. But I have some slides and some images that I hope
let me
will.
make you, sorry. Make you
Okay, no problem.
And
Thanks,
now you
Tina.
can share.
That's sick. All right, so I'm just going to go into presentation mode here. Great. So yeah, it occurred to me the other day that I just sort of crossed 10 years of being a member of the Explorers Club, which kind of blew my mind that, this dream of exploration really came true. And it was from being a student member. It's someone of fairly humble background without, exploration really feeling like it was in the cards for me. And so I wanted to, pay homage a little bit to everyone who helped me along the way, and also share, because I think that all of you are such great mentors to young explorers. And I think that's such an important piece of our club, is how we can bring up the next generation of explorers.
Trevor, can I
So
interrupt real quick? It looks like maybe you're in like presenter mode. We can see 2 slides instead of 1.
Got you.
Is there one where there? Well,
let me
if it's just fine if there's no alternative.
Yeah, I think it would work, but
yeah, it's not. Let me. Um,
Don't worry about it if there's not a easy solution.
Tim, while he's doing that, thanks for the shout out. Sorry, I'm currently moving from Illinois down to Georgia, and I started driving at 4 a.m. this morning.
Ooh.
So I'm on the call. Still wanted to make it, but still in the U-Haul driving down.
Well, be careful.
Thank you.
Don't let us distract you too much.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Trevor.
All right, I think I got it. Appreciate all your patience. So yeah, just a little recap of what I'm gonna talk about today is, yeah, basically how I got started in the world of exploration and scientific field research. A short recap of some of the projects I've worked on and some of the regions I've worked in, and then my most recent project of the Menorca shipwreck, which I'll be returning to do in the fall, this coming fall, and then a little bit of overview of my VP responsibilities, talking about grants, which we can get really deep into grants. And so we can kind of go as much or as little as everyone's interested in. And then, yeah, some time for questions. So really where I got started was a program called Students on Ice that brings kids to the polar regions, started by Explorers Club fellow Jeff Green. I believe he's also a Stephenson medalist. And on that trip, I was able to meet Explorers Club medalist, Dr. Fred Roots, who is pretty legendary explorer, has a mountain range named after him in Antarctica. And being able to get a scholarship to go to Antarctica was just like a dream come true for me and really just changed my life. It was a random email I saw in my high school's general folder, and all my friends thought it was some sort of scam. And I just, did the application all weekend and crossed my fingers, and lo and behold, was able to go to Antarctica and was able to meet all these incredible explorers, polar historians, marine biologists, and of course, Dr. Roots on this expedition. And I continue to serve on the scholarship review board of Students on Ice, which continues to bring students from around the world to have these incredible experiences. So through that as well, I was able to have a continuing relationship also with the polar region, so also in the Arctic. So I was able to shoot a short film in the Antarctic about climate change that I showed at Explorers Club headquarters when I was 19 years old, and it kind of blew my mind, and I just wanted to get involved with the club in any way possible. So I was part of one of the first groups of Adventure Canada Young Explorers, where I shot a short ethnographic film about Inuit Kayimaya, which is the traditional knowledge systems and how they're passed down from one generation to the next. And subsequently, Adventure Canada liked the film I made, and I've been working for them for about 7 years now as expedition team. That me on the left, I'm flying a drone in Jakobshavn Glacier in Greenland. It's brought me to some of the most incredible spots in the high Arctic. And just this past summer, I was supported by Fujifilm to create a short documentary about Jason Edmonds, who's one of the EC50 awardees this year, who is currently the only Inuk expedition leader from an indigenous expedition leader from the region who's leading these types of trips. So he's really pushing the limits and really bringing on the next generation of people from this land who are guiding people to experience the Arctic. And actually, next week, I will be heading back to the Arctic to Kugluktuk in the Central Arctic. It will be my first true polar winter experience, so wish me luck. I'm currently based in Kauai, so it's going to be quite the climate shift for me. And yeah, with a daily high temperature of -20 and about 5 hours of sunlight, it's going to be interesting filming conditions. But it's a fascinating project. It's looking at stories of the land. So there's a group of musicians actually, including Explorers Club fellow James Raffin, who's a writer, a canoe expert, who's heading to Kugluktuk actually with a donation of musical instruments for the high schoolers there. If you can imagine, it's very remote. You don't get a lot of enrichment opportunities. So and it's only accessible by like DC-3 or Twin Otter or boat. So we're flying in a bunch of musical instruments, and then they're doing this week-long workshop series called Stories of the Land, where they're working with these high school students to write songs that talk about their relationship to the land. Many of my early flag expeditions were in the steppe region. My first flag expedition was with Dr. Gino Kaspari. You can see with me up on top of that good old Soviet WAS vehicle that we used to get across to our different field research locations. The first trip we did actually was in northwestern China in Xinjiang in 2016. But looking for these Iron Age tombs, we were put in jail for being too close to a border zone with Kazakhstan. And as you can understand, that kind of put us off doing research in that type of area. And now Xinjiang is one of the most difficult to access areas for research in the world. And we thought at the time that going over the border to Russia would make things easier. You can see on the right there, I am patrolling some of our area because we were hunting for some of our food actually on the longer campaigns. We were excavating a Scythian burial mound over the course of 3-4 years, and the team is still there doing it. Unfortunately, we're not able to return because of the war in Ukraine and sanctions, which restricts the funding for the area. But it was a fascinating discovery that we made, which turned out to be the oldest Scythian tomb ever found. And I hope to return one day. This is some of my photos that were published in National Geographic of some of what we were able to find in this early Iron Age tomb. These arrowheads were among over 100 skeletons that revealed a super high level of violence. The physical anthropologists were analyzing chop marks, and you can see that skull has a sort of impact wound from a bone arrowhead. And it was one of the highest instances. I think there was almost 30% of the skeletons that we found had some kind of marked violence on the bone. So it was a sort of really kind of harrowing but fascinating find that we made. These are actually all secondary burials that we found around the fringe of the burial mound, and the center chamber that usually has most of the artifacts, and the sort of chieftain or important individual who was buried in the middle. We still haven't been able to excavate that. So there's still mysteries to uncover at that site, which is in southern Siberia. The site is called Tunuk 1, and it's in the Republic of Tuva, just right in this steppe area where really, like in ancient times, now there's borders that kind of crisscross through all these zones. So some parts of the Scythian material culture were in Mongolia or Kazakhstan, or even, as I mentioned, northwestern China. But now it's all divided up, making research really interesting, a real blank spot, but also really difficult to do because of the political reasons. For that discovery, Dr. Kaspari and I were lucky enough in 2018 to receive the New Explorer of the Year award alongside other legendary Explorers Club members like Captain Jim Lovell, Dr. Edith Witter, Dave Dillon, of course, Jeff Bezos. And that was a really incredible experience, for which after I got the tap to do the VP job in 2019, which I felt like the club had given me so many opportunities, and I had gotten so many possibilities to pursue my research that I wanted to give back in this volunteer capacity. So since then, as Tim alluded to, I've been doing some places, not at all the frigid cold. I've been working on a long-term project with our recently announced New Explorer of the Year award, Callie Wielenturf. There we are, when we were doing an interview last year with Dr. Sylvia Earle, Her Deepness, which was really inspiring. On the right, you can see I'm filming a leatherback sea turtle in the Darien Gap. So we're in a tiny little town called Armilla, which is just like a stone's throw away from Colombia, and a fascinating place for leatherback nesting, but also really dangerous. So everywhere we would go, we had military escorts from the Panamanian border security because it's a super high red zone for narco trafficking and human trafficking. But they're proposing to build several ports in that area, and there's no data on the leatherbacks in the Gulf of Uraba. And there's pretty good evidence that the ports would have massive impacts on the leatherbacks, as well as really, really make the issues of human trafficking and narco trafficking worse. So we deployed 10 satellite tags on these leatherbacks, and you can see most of the time they're nesting at night, but this turtle actually got a little bit disoriented, so we were able to get some beautiful morning shots before she returned to the sea. I'm involved in a variety of different cultural and archaeological projects where I'm based in Kauai. In particular, a sacred burial ground called Polihale. If any of you ever happen to be in Kauai, just definitely let me know. It's a beautiful place, and I love to give people recommendations on cool places to visit and things off the beaten track. This long-term project I'm working on, you can see two hula dancers from the lineal descendants of an archaeological site there. So the site is over 800 years old. It's a sacred area that is both the heiau, a temple, as well as an agricultural complex. And there we were able to clear that area of invasive plants and have the lineal descendants from that area do a hula dance for the first time there in about 200 years, and film that experience as part of a short documentary I'm working on. So if you're all interested, that's polihale.org for that project. And yeah, recently I was able to join another project in a sweltering hot place. We were in northeastern India during the monsoon in July, August, which I don't recommend. I'm embarrassed to say how sweaty I am in that photo. We were investigating, me and Kim Frank, who's the expedition leader, recently did a presentation at the club. We're looking into Asian elephant conflict to coexistence. So looking at these small villages where specifically during the rice paddy season, the elephants will come from, for example, Gorumara National Park, where I am in that photo, and go through the villages and kind of rampaging. So there's a lot of conflict between local people and elephants that they're trying to find innovative ways. And there we're actually riding elephants, not as a part of an elephant riding tour, which has a lot of ethical questions, but the forest rangers actually in Gorumara National Park use orphaned elephants to patrol the area for that one-horned rhino you see on the right, because patrolling on elephant back is basically the only safe way to go into some of these areas where there are wild elephants, dangerous snakes, leopards, you name it. So there I am on the back of an elephant behind this, one of the mahouts, the elephant drivers, and one of the park rangers who had an ancient looking shotgun that kept poking me in the stomach as we were like three guys holding on. I was trying to film, also being pelted by rain. So that's a super, super cool project that Kim just got her book deal solidified, and they're finishing up that documentary that I was able to contribute footage to. So my main project that I have been working on for the past 3 years that I'm continuing to do is a flag expedition to Menorca, which is an underwater archaeology expedition, excavating an 18th century wreck, which you can see. That's actually not flag 69, that's flag 240. They were kind enough to give us two flags for this expedition, so we could take one of them underwater. Since flag 69 is actually from 1937, we're a little bit worried to be like too rough with that one. To give a little background, Menorca is the easternmost of the Balearic Islands off the coast of Spain. And we were doing our research in Ciutadella, which is on the western part of Menorca, which is one of these beautiful natural harbors, but one that oftentimes had wrecks in it, and that came from a meteorological phenomenon called a risaga, which would basically, it's a meteo tsunami that would ground boats very quickly and sink them. And since this was a Roman settlement with Phoenician cultural evidence there's wrecks going back hundreds and thousands of years. So this is actually one of the early surveys in 2009 that identified at least 4 wrecks in this little cove, Cala en Busquets. And you can see in this overlay photo, you can see what the harbor looks like. It's a working harbor, so it took me 3 years to get the permission to actually excavate here, working with local and Spanish government. That's the not very sexy part of archaeology, is all the paperwork. But it really paid off this past fall because we were able to bring a group of folks to start uncovering this wreck. And it's a perfect wreck for beginning in underwater archaeology because it's only about 3-4 meters deep. So it's only like, 10 to 15 feet deep. And we're able to dive off that jetty, and using these water pumps start to uncover what lay below. So you can see on the left, I have my team of Spanish archaeologists, Xavi Aguelo, who first found these wrecks in 2009, our tech specialist, Bruno Perez, who did all the 3D modeling, Carlos Velasco, Dr. Carlos Velasco, who's a term member, and Carolina Godoy, who is our polyglot coordinator, speaks 7 languages and can help basically figure out any logistical problem we have. And on the right, we have a bunch of other Explorers Club members who made up our field school. So we put together a field school to introduce people to underwater archaeology who hadn't gotten into this yet, who didn't actually, half of the field school hadn't even had their open water. So we were able to facilitate their certification and get them finding artifacts and uncovering the wreck pretty quickly. So these are some of the records they have of the wreck that we believe is the one that we are excavating, which was likely a pinke ship, or a pink. It's comes from the Dutch word for pinched. You can see example on the right. It's like a pinched. The stern of the ship is narrower, and it's good for getting in these small coves. And it was a merchant ship of about 23 meters long. And there is an account. So the Spanish crown did many like anytime there was a shipwreck, the Spanish crown would do all the salvage work, basically take everything they could find before the owners of the ship could, and put them in warehouses with very high interest rates. So we have amazing chronology and archive documents of what sank, at least from that, it was 300 years ago, but in archaeological terms, it's modern, of these modern shipwrecks. So we believe it was La Purísima Concepción de Nuestra Señora, a ship that sank in December of 1702. But there's still some mystery left because we haven't uncovered the whole ship, because there was also 100 years of British occupation. So we don't have records from that time. So both the Purísima Concepción and maybe other British ships were in that area. We'll have to see. This is kind of what the excavation looks like, where we're able to uncover part of the hull. You can see the frames of the ship, and you can see our water pumps and these flexible hoses that just have a very soft suction that takes the sediment off. And you can see there's almost a meter of this Posidonia of seagrass roots that have grown over the wreck that we have to remove little by little. And there you can see on the right, Xavi is using an underwater slate to draw a schematic that we've been using to understand the naval architecture and try to get closer to that mystery of which ship this is. So this is a 3D model of the trench that we were able to expose, and Bruno was nice enough to do a little 3D print of it as well. So you can see just a little bit that we've uncovered thus far that was exciting, but a little bit frustrating since we were hit by 3 storms that actually covered up a lot of our work that we had to redo. So next year, we're going to be doing the expedition a month earlier to hopefully miss that weather, because it is not very comfortable excavating when you can barely see your hands in front of you. And I luckily was using these spearfishing gloves that have like a little red dot. And that was like, I could basically see the red dot if my hand was this far in front of my face because of all the sediment. But it is good experience. It's part of underwater archaeology, and of course, part of the adventure too. So these are some of the cool finds we had. Like I said, there's cultural material from thousands of years. So this was a 1st to 2nd century BC plate of Punic origin, probably like Roman Punic, Carthaginian. It had a Latin inscription on the bottom that we're still deciphering, but it appears to be the longest Latin inscription ever found on anything in Minorca. So it's a really cool clue that we found. And it's amazing that after over 2,000 years that was just lying there on the surface intact. And on the right, Tim, one of our field school participants, has a wooden bowl, which, you know, doesn't look like much, but is actually incredibly rare because wooden artifacts usually float away really quickly. So to find something wooden, it also takes a ton of effort to conserve wooden artifacts, but we're in the process of studying that one further. So next year we're going to return to do continue our naval architecture analysis, as well as C14 date a medieval wreck that's in there. We have 3 sessions planned for the field school for the fall, basically from mid-September through October. And we also hope on the right you can see another wreck off the southern coast of Menorca, where they found looks like Phoenician amphora near Talayotic, the tribal communities that were on Menorca together. So they've never found that together, and they've never found pottery from the Talayotic peoples outside of Menorca. So this would be like a massive find. It would be from the 6th century BC, so it would also be one of the oldest wrecks ever found in the Western Mediterranean. And we're working to try to coordinate side scanning sonar survey as well as an ROV search to try to find that. 100 meters is a little deep, especially for me to dive. I'm not a mixed gas diver. Relatively new to this whole crazy world of underwater exploration, having come from most of my work being in Siberia. But these were our partners. We partnered with both of the museums on Menorca, the Museo de Menorca and the Museo Cansaura, where we did our field school sessions in the 16th century villa that they converted to the museum and house all the artifacts that we'll find. We had Servisub, our industrial dive provider that built us our floating dock, helped us with our equipment and our air tanks. Our fiscal sponsorship was through the Ocean Foundation and the Explorers Club. And if y'all are interested in joining or learning more about the project, that is the menorcashipwreckproject.com. I will play a short video. I hope it works. That chronicles a bit of our adventure. Just 2 minutes.
Off the coast of Catalonia, there is a collection of islands at the crossroads of the Mediterranean. The long natural harbors of Menorca welcomed ancient mariners from the time of the Phoenicians to the Romans. Stones tell much of the story of this place, of ritual offerings to the gods of sea and harvest. On the western side of Menorca is the town of Ciutadella. There are 8 tomes chronicling the ships wrecked from the 1500s onwards, and there is one account that especially stands out. La Purísima Concepción de Nuestra Señora is recorded in the island's archives as sinking in the cove of Cala and Busquets in 1702. Referred to as an underwater museum by archaeologists, most of the wrecks in Cala and Busquets are under 2 feet of sediment. In 2023, an international team of local archaeologists and Explorers Club members set out to uncover the 18th century wreck at the mouth of the harbor. But this is not the only wreck in Busquets. Archaeologist Xavi Aguelo has identified a handful in this small area, a team of time travelers and adventurous misfits from around the world working together to uncover the unknown. The thousands of leagues this vessel sailed ultimately led it to an untimely end at the bottom of a windswept cove, where it gains new life as a thread in the tapestry of Menorca's history. Touch something no one has touched for hundreds or thousands of years, to feel connected to the continuity of humanity for a moment.
So that voiceover, I was lucky. I'm always struck by how our Explorers Club members are multi-talented, and that was actually Dave Hodge, who's an Explorers Club fellow. He led his silky radio voice to do the voiceover for that one, which I really appreciated. And we got some music from our team members as well. So that's just like a little taste of what that expedition, which we hope to do for the next few years, since there's so many wrecks on Minorca. Yeah, so just to kind of wrap up on my own personal projects and transition now to my work as VP of Research and Education, which I've been doing, geez, now close to 5 years, including the pandemic. We've been expanding on our education programs, which includes Tim's amazing work with Reach the World, and our virtual classroom and outreach and education partners, which is something I have a master's in education myself and was a classroom teacher, continue to substitute teach, something that I want to expand and improve. I think many people see the VP of Research and Education as only grants, but there's so much more that we can do. And I've always been really inspired by what Tim and so many of our members are doing in that area. This year, we've kicked off for the first time since the pandemic, the Explores Cubs program, and I was able to get the board to fund making this program accessible to Title I schools. So that funding is my attempt to try to bring in kids from classrooms around New York City who wouldn't have the chance to otherwise to attend the Explorers Clubs program, which is bringing explorers like Kim Frank, who's doing that presentation on our expedition in India, for elementary school students. And then every year we do a grantee symposium where we try to get our members who come for the annual dinner to get to meet some of our incredible top-ranked grantees. So that's a photo from last year's symposium, which we'll be doing again this year at ECAD. A little bit of a grants overview. We have many, many, many different grant programs. So just to keep those all going is a big part of what I do. And that's sometimes where I'm not able to do as much as I'd want on the education side, just because working with our brand partners and our endowed grants is a lot. So our two endowed grants are the Rising Explorer Grant and the Exploration Fund, which have been going basically since the 60s. And these are for early career grants, generally the Rising Explorer being for high school or undergrad students typically. And this year we staggered a bit of the application deadlines in October and November, just to give Emerald, our director of grants, who does all the heavy lifting and so much hard work, a chance to really help get all those applications sorted. Because we get over 1,000, between all our programs, we get over 1,000 grant applications each year. So it is a lot, even just to process those. The Rolex Scholar Grant is our oldest brand sponsored grant. So we've been partnering with Rolex for many years. Those are 5 grants at $10,000 each. There are certain age requirements. Some grants have age requirements. I have been working in my tenure as VP to try to make the grants more open to explorers of all ages. But some of our sponsored grants have always had a focus on youth, which includes Rolex. They have defined the under 35 requirement. That is one of our most competitive programs. Recently, the Stevenson Exploration Advancement, or C grants, is dedicated to marine research. That one is much more open, just has to be marine research related. And that's 4 grants of $10,000. The Fjallraven Field Grant is 2 grants, which makes this one incredibly, incredibly competitive. And this is also open. This one's open basically to all field science disciplines for early career scientists. And we got more. As you can see, there are a lot. So I already mentioned a program that I had done back in the day, the Adventure Canada Young Explorers Program. So this is one of the types of programs that's not necessarily like it's a berth on one of their itineraries. So like what I did, I proposed a project that could be done during one of their trips that they offer. Mine included interviewing local elders in the different places we were going in Nunavut in the Eastern Arctic. Other past grantees have done microplastic research, trawling behind zodiacs, various different opportunities, but it has to be catered towards what you're able to do on a ship, on one of these expedition cruise ships. And that goes for the Ponant Science Expedition grants as well. They have a very sophisticated lab on their, as well as a helicopter on their expedition cruise ship, doing cruises all around the world. They are going to offer 5 open berths for 2025, but they have not announced that yet. And there's also a unique thing where projects can actually include two project members, whereas Adventure Canada is just for individuals. And Adventure Canada is 18 to 30, and Ponant is open. And then we have Exodus Exploration Without Boundaries grant, which is 4 grants at $4,000 each. And this was a grant that we partnered with another travel company, but this is for self-driven expeditions. But this one is completely open. Like, we wanted to think of a grant that really got outside of the traditional boundaries of the academic field work and looked at people who were perhaps coming from their country of research, from some of these indigenous communities who may not be typically seen as researchers or scientists, but giving them the opportunity to propose a project as well. But this one is really open, and I think one of the ones that has really shined, because exploration is definitely about collecting data, collecting knowledge, but it's also about storytelling. It's also about thinking outside of the box and being creative with how we define what exploration is. And then previously, for the past 4 years, 3.5 years, we were doing a widely publicized grant with Discovery Channel, which unfortunately we've had to put a pause to. We funded many incredible expeditions. Some of our largest single grant the club has ever given to Dr. Ed Liu for his asteroid mapping projects with B612. We've funded Alejandro Arteaga, who discovered 5 new species in Ecuador. We've done amazing things with that program. Unfortunately, Discovery Channel went through a $40 billion merger. So the program became difficult for them to support at the moment. So I think a lot of folks are wondering, oh, like, did the program not do well, or what happened to it? We're looking into continuing this program through private donors, and that's why you see the Explorers Club Impact Grants that will fund projects at this level, because I believe that it's important that we're funding expeditions that are really making massive discoveries. And although it's totally possible to do an expedition with big impact for $10,000, many of these very ambitious expeditions require supporting big teams, big logistics, and things that are more amongst $25,000 to $50,000, which was our average for the Discovery grants. So we could see what explorers could really do with that amount of funding. And I think it's important to do that as well. Some of our, like, in the realm of expedition funding, there's gaps where National Geographic, for example, is not funding as much anymore. And so I think it's time for us to step up, and we're really going to work hard to try to find donors who can support those impact grants. And that is led by Rebecca Martin, who also happens to have been the head of the Expedition Council for Nat Geo for 30 years. So she brings in a fantastic network and a lot of experience in leading that program, which we hope to announce very soon. So a little bit about the basics of applying, just so you know, in case anybody asks you, or if any of you are interested in applying to a grant. It's some pretty basic biographical data, a short description, a title. The title, it's much better if the title is not a super complex scientific jargon title. It doesn't have to be, quote unquote, dumbed down, but something that could be understandable to a relatively broad audience. Applicants should identify what type of institutional backing, if any, or affiliations they have. There are questions about ethical considerations and permits, which is always very important. We include a budget, which they need to give the broad strokes of what they would be spending the grant on. Their team members, including at least one local collaborator, and a CV and a resume. That's just a little bit more information about what we fund. We don't typically fund, physical feats of strength and these, people chasing records or firsts that, would only exist in the Guinness Book of World Records is not really what our club is really about at this moment in the 21st century of exploration. It's about going out into the field, doing conservation, bringing back new knowledge, bringing back information and understanding as well, and not just, sticking a flag at the top of a mountain. These are some of the qualities that we look for in strong applications, mission alignment being kind of first and foremost, a key knowledge gap in a large scientific question with an impact in that given field. So sometimes it's extremely difficult for our grant review team to compare, a botany expedition with an archaeology expedition. And sometimes we have to do a lot of research and call on specialists to do that when we do our final rankings, because many of these grant programs are all scientific field disciplines, but we really try to look at how ambitious are the questions they're asking and the methods they're using to answer those questions. Of course, feasibility, it can be the most ambitious and impactful project ever, but it has to be feasible. So we look at appropriate budget so that it's a budget that makes sense for the expedition they propose, that it's not too little and then it's not too much, and that certain costs like non-expendable costs like cameras or laptops or camera traps or drones they're very, very crucial for the expedition, because sometimes you see people will stack on a bunch of really shiny new toys that may or may not be appropriate for that expedition, but oftentimes they are. And we look into the feasibility. A lot of that has to do with local collaboration, how well versed they are in that area or region. Ethics is incredibly important to our committee. There is a question that sometimes is left blank, and I try to, in some of our Q&As and on the website, I try to suggest to applicants that they fill in the ethical questions or ethical considerations section. Sometimes I think they will misunderstand it and think that that is describing where their expedition is unethical. It's not. What we are encouraging is them to think about what sensitivities could be in the region, in the type of field research they're doing, especially if they're working on sampling or with human remains or human subjects that would require, in most universities, an internal review board, and of course, abiding by local and international laws, so that, they can't, even if they don't already have the permits, that they understand what the permits they will need to get for their proposed expedition. And then especially in the early career grants, we do look at career impact. So if somebody has been doing this archaeological field work for many, many decades or many years, and they've already have the support to do it, we probably would go with somebody else that would more enhance and support their career trajectory. Or if it seems like they're not, it's a sort of one-off fun, adventurous trip for them, and it's not part of their career ambitions, we will try to elevate the applicants that have made it clear in the sections that describe their career ambitions, that this is what they want to do for, for their calling. The storytelling part, it's not a requirement that applicants, for almost all of them, are expert filmmakers or photographers in any way, shape, or form, but we do encourage applicants to think about how they can share their research with the broader audience, how education and outreach and the basic report requirements, which, we have applicants from all around the world who may not have access to cameras and documentation equipment, but we have a sort of bare minimum, which we think is very reasonable, of a handful of photos, a written report, and if possible, we can help support the applicants as well. But it's just that willingness to want to share what they find. Sometimes we encounter that they have partial funding from another organization that has tied them up in contracts, so we have to be careful about that. National Geographic is well known for their contracts that have NDAs and ways that make it tricky for us to also fund their research. And then thoroughness, it's just you know, detailed answers. The letters of recommendation are important. You know, sometimes if it's lacking one letter of recommendation, we'll reach out to the applicant. But like I said, Emerald is going through thousands of applications. And so answering all these minute questions and also reminding the applicants to complete the whole application is, you know, something that we do as best we can. So yeah, that is basically my presentation. Thank you for paying attention. Thank you for all showing up to hear me talk about my expeditions, and then yeah, the world of research and education.
Thank you so much, Trevor. I am sure there are questions. Of course, I say that and then nobody's going to raise their hand. There we go. Jim, go ahead.
Well, Trevor, you seem to overlap somewhat with Flag and Honors. Is that correct?
I don't. I'm familiar with the process of Flag and Honors, but they're actually separate committees. So our grant reviewers are in the dozens. Flag and Honors, I think, is 7 to 10 of rotating. That's Martin Nuia. So I know a bit about applying for flags, having applied for and been on several flag expeditions myself, but yeah, and I continue to nominate folks for the awards, and I know that Martin has really encouraged all the VPs and board members and chapters to nominate folks as much as you can for those awards. But I don't know if I answered your question.
Well, yeah,
there, Jim.
so you give grants to people who are not on flag expeditions, it sounds like.
We give grants to people who aren't even members, actually. So that is a way that we encourage and recruit new members. And in fact, if they happen to be a student, they get a year of free student membership, and they only need one letter of recommendation to. That's something that I implemented actually in my first year, because I was like, we need to get our grantees. Like sometimes we just throw money out there, but then we don't involve them in the culture and the community of the club, which you could definitely do better. But that was one of the first things that I wanted to do, is just have like a, you know, kind of jump start to students who have done field research, have already proven that they qualify by getting a grant, they should become members.
This isn't really a question, but I wanted to congratulate you. I noticed you and I went up for reclassification and succeeded at the same time. So high five. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah. Other questions? I know some of you are interested in this. Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
Hello, Trevor. Paul Tang, great to hear you with Midwest chapter here. And my question is, out of all of the grants that you've reviewed, which is an amazing process of just how the club administers that, what has most surprised you about going through all those grant applications? What do you know now that you didn't know when you started?
I think, well, the thing that shocks me is, and this is something that I've been trying to think broadly about, is how can we fund more field exploration? And that's actually, I put it on myself, like, how can I find more money for the club? Honestly, because like some of our acceptance rate are like 1 to 2%. And what shocked me is the difficulty of being in that situation where you have, you know, 24 incredible expeditions that 100% like deserve it, and they're, you know, fractions of points in between, and you have 4 grants or 2 grants to give. You know, and I think when you really look at it, that's where a lot of what Richard Garrett has been doing with trying to do larger partnerships and reaching out to brands to support more grants. I think a lot of people are kind of hesitant about the club becoming commercialized or kind of selling its soul somewhat, but just seeing what we were able to do with those partnerships was really amazing, and I think has really elevated the profile of the club. Also, in, you know, if the tree falls in the forest and no one hears it, it's like sort of like for many years, people weren't even aware of what was going on with our grants. And one of the things that shocked me as well is that we have this incredible archive of grantees who've written thousands of books and gone on to professorships. And, you know, we gave Jared Diamond 2 grants, like, you know, in the 60s. We were giving grants to women before they were members, which was also strange, but I feel like grants was a little ahead of the curve in that sense. And that's where something that has also been like on the docket for me is to try to like go back and almost try to build like an alumni connection of the grants to, and try to bring those former grantees who were maybe not 100% like brought into the fold during their time as members, because I think that you know, it's a really strong group of folks who could really add to our community. And as well, I think that now with the way that the club has been updating, we have more programming, we're virtually connected, we're growing internationally, there's more benefits to being a member. So it's easier. Sometimes when I talk to the folks who are more on the hard science and are out in the field all the time, they're like, how does this benefit me? But I think that now we're starting to make a better and better case of why it's worth it. I don't know if that answered your question.
Looks like it. Other questions?
I have a quick question for you, Trevor. There are a bunch of us here who are educators of some sort at some level. And I'm just curious for you, over the course of your expeditions, how has your teacher background sort of informed your desire to share what you're doing? Like how do those two work together for you?
Oh man, I think it's like it's almost one and the same. Like I felt like we're also connecting to my skills and what I offer as a filmmaker. I feel like the films is trying to reach a broader classroom almost. It's a way to connect with folks. And even in this last Minorca Shipwreck project, building a field school component into it was really a brought in folks from all different types of backgrounds who wanted to learn and sort of lifelong learners. The age range was 16 to 70 of our team. We were able to support a scholarship student as well. And I think that just really like it boosts the curiosity at bringing in folks who are in the field sciences as well as not. And, you know, that's what makes us different from also, you know, National Science Foundation funding or like, you know, really like rigid hard sciences. There's some kind of romantic curiosity about being part of the Explorers Club or part of an Explorers Club flag expedition. I feel like that's what brings a lot of us together, as well as that piece of it. Along with making impactful discoveries and adding to our body of scientific knowledge. But I think learning and sort of also cross-generational learning is so now fundamental. It's going to be fundamental, I think, to all the expeditions I do.
Melissa, go ahead.
Hi, I was wondering, so if you could pick like the top 3 secrets to getting your grant proposal accepted, and you've seen probably thousands of them at this point, if not tens of thousands, what would be like the 3 secret things to make sure that to make yours stand out? I mean, is it what your topic is? Is it the way you write? Is it your CV? Is it your recommendations? What are the secret things that nobody knows, but they should be in there?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like sometimes I mean, that's, you know, catching lightning in a bottle. I get rejected all the time for grants. And many of these projects that I eventually got funded, I think I applied for the Scott Perlman Field Award 4 times before I got it. So I think part of that secret sauce is just being relentless and persistent. But along with that, I think it's always asking the question of yourself, like, why are you the person to be doing that particular expedition? Why basically no one can do it but you? And in that case, I think that you can find the uniqueness of why it matters. And then also your team is incredibly important. That's what we've really looked deeply into is, you know, there's this idea of kind of parachute science and idea of the explorer coming from one place and going to this exotic locale to do field research. But we really value, and I think with the way the club is shifting, about local collaborators. And also it's just like anybody who's done field research knows like how much more efficient, how much more functional, how much more you're able to do, like, you know, with tight local collaboration or locals leading that particular expedition. So I think that's the second one. I think the third one is sometimes just clear goals. I think sometimes we see a lot where it's like really, really broad. It's a common pitfall where it's like you want to be super ambitious, but then you also like want it to be feasible. So oftentimes it's massive regions or trying to do big transects. And I think that, you know, really specific goals, the right team, and the project, the PI or the expedition leader, whatever you want to call it, is the right person in the right time and the right circumstances to do that particular project.
Thank you. I had a quick question. I think it ties in a little bit with what Tim was saying. The education portion. I've got a son who's going to be 16 in June, and I also teach anthropology classes. We have a lot of archaeology students in our major. I was curious about how young, you mentioned a 16-year-old in your expedition, how younger kids can get involved, and then are there opportunities for college students to learn about the field schools that you've been working with?
Yeah, so most of the grants are for 18 and above. But there are a lot of, and I'm happy to share some resources of different exchange programs. And like I should definitely apply to Students on Ice. I think that's an incredible program as well. There was a program I did when I was 17 called Where There Be Dragons, which is like a kind of cultural language immersion program that offers scholarships. A lot of times these programs are incredibly expensive, and you know, for what it's worth, there's a lot of risk and logistics that goes into doing it. So I'm always trying to find you know, scholarship opportunities when I make these recommendations, because but I think that ultimately they can be really life-changing for young people. Field schools can be a bit of a controversial topic, especially in the area of archaeology, where you end up paying a lot of money to get field experience, and then there's the job opportunities. Sometimes it can be tricky. It's not a field where typically you know, where folks make tons of money. But I think that what I'm trying to do with the field school that I've launched is have donors who support through the fiscal sponsorship, and then in turn are able to fund full scholarships for the students. So I'm continuing to try to raise money so that any students that come are completely supported in doing that. Because I think sometimes in the undergrad field school, you know, and even equivalents like Earthwatch, I think are a really interesting model of that. But I think from what I've heard, and I don't mean to gossip or anything, but sometimes the scientists are not ecstatic about how they're compensated for their time. So I think in my short experience and new endeavors into this world of combining education, philanthropy, and bringing on the next generation of explorers, I think that it's really important to compensate the scientists, because I think that their careers that can sometimes burn out, and you're working long months in the field. And oftentimes when they're applying for grants, they can't include salaries, they can't include things that actually make the research better and make the findings better and make it something that you can do for years instead of, you know, really wearing yourself down to threads.
Well, thank you. Do you have a website that you can put in our chat?
Yes, I will put. And then I will put the Menorca.
Awesome. Thank you.
Oh, of course. And I'm looking at trying to expand this idea of field schools to other field sites as well. I've just been able to connect with Carl Lupo, who has done research on Rapa Nui, to potentially do a field school next year using satellite imagery to map how the moai were moved. So that's a really exciting one that would be a pilot project that we do. And then I'm trying to incorporate this into a lot of the work that I'm doing. but there's
Thank you.
also a lot of already established field schools. We had a lot of applications. I'm trying to remember the name of it, for our Rising Explorer program this year, about a field school in Belize that is on a Maya site. And I think it's just MRP, the Maya Research Project. I'm just gonna look that up. Yeah, it's the Maya Research Program, and it's led by an Explorers Club member. So I'll just drop that in the chat as well. And we have actually given those Rising Explorer grants to support the field school fees for that one as well. And it looks like looks like a fascinating program. I'd love to do it.
And let me post another one that David just sent me, which is the polyholly.org. Whoops, I just sent it back to David. Not what I meant to do. Here we go. Wow. So there's a lot to look at. I know everybody's going to take a look at those. I want to thank you so much for your time and for coming here. I know you're literally just about to take off and on a new expedition. So your time is very valuable. We really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate all of you. It's great to see your faces, and yeah, never be shy to reach out. And I hope that if I don't respond immediately, I'll definitely try to get back to you. And thank you for all your questions. And yeah, I'm just so glad to be part of this community of explorers. And I hope at some point I can make it to one of your chapters and learn about all your expeditions, and
Yeah.
perhaps see some of you at ECAD.
Yeah, out of curiosity, who's in this group going to be at ECAD this year? Okay, so not a bad representation. So we'll have to track you all down, right? Be fun.
Come find me. And I think I'm going to be at Oceans Week this year as well. So if anyone's, it'll be my first Oceans Week, which is like, big problem. It's amazing. I think there's so much going on in Oceans and Climate Week that I've missed. And so I'm really looking forward to that.
Very cool. And I know a few people were talking about GLEX online too. So hopefully, I don't know if you go to that one as well, but you'll run into us eventually.
I hope so. Yeah, GLEX. I've been to GLEX once and it was amazing. I think sometimes it's a little bit smaller than ECAD. ECAD can be, one, it's expensive, and there's so much craziness going on, and it's a lot. And I mean, it's definitely worth it, but I loved GLEX because it's a little bit more intimate. You get a lot of, time with folks to discuss and make plans for expeditions. And this is what it's all about. And sort of a little unsolicited advice, or if pass it on to anyone that is interested in the club. It's like, what I've found is the more you put into it, the more you get out of it. And it's a lot of the people, because people ask, like, what do you get out of being a member? And it's sort of this intangible thing of being part of this strange tribe of folks with esoteric interests, but it's a lot more than that too.
Well, thank you very much. I think
On
Jim-
that note, could I give my book report?
Yes, go for it, Jim. I have you in the agenda.
You can see this. This is a new book that came out last year, 2023. I actually was looking through, and Trevor's actually cited in a few points. I've been a member since '98. A lot of times, the younger members who don't go to ECAD, they know it's prestigious in a way. They know that it's important, and it's an accomplishment to be a member of the Explorers Club, but they have no idea, and I don't know how you would without a book like this. It's by a guy named Jeff Wilser. And I got this in my local bookstore. So it's out there in any, because this is a small town we're in, and that they have this in the bookstore. So probably any major bookstore anywhere on the planet maybe will have this. If they don't, obviously Amazon will have it. It talks about the past, the present, and the future. The club has evolved and is evolving. What Trevor's doing is clearly taking it in a different direction than it had been. And so I highly recommend this book for all members of the club. Should have read it. It's a good read. The guy does a nice job putting it all together, and it's got some nice pictures of the club for those of you who haven't physically been to the club. So it's by 10 Speed Press, Jeff Wilser, WILSER, the Explorers Club, a simple one to remember. I also want to say that being a member of this club, this chapter, I should say, has been an interesting. I gave a presentation last December, and those of you who were there, which wasn't a huge audience, it was about the Osirian, which is my project in Egypt that I've been doing for over 40 years. In the last month, it's dried up. And it has been wet since 1914. And all of a sudden, and we're monitoring it, we've got these active things. But the thing is about that the fact that you recorded this, put it out on YouTube. Not that this is just breaking news. This just happened the last few weeks. But people are contacting me based on that presentation on the website that you recorded. So it's another kind of interesting byproduct of being a member of this chapter. And I got to thank you for recording this and then putting it out on YouTube. How we communicate, how people find out about expeditions, it's the great mystery of the club. People do these fantastic expeditions, but it is the tree falls in the forest and nobody's around to hear it. And a lot of times, historically, they don't file reports. They get a flag expedition, and then they don't do it, and then the archivists. So exploration can be just kind of, you do it, and this book talks about why people do it. It's a very good book. We're driven. Those of us who do field work are driven, and there's just no other way to describe it. So that's my book report. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Jim. And I think it sounds really interesting. I've seen the ones that are edited volumes with a lot of different people contributing, but I didn't realize that this one was a single author and more of a history. So that's really interesting.
For younger members, it's really insightful, I think.
Very cool. I've got a couple other things on our agenda. I know we're a little bit over time. We talked about ECAD and GLEC, so did that. I just wanted to point out too that there is a survey request that headquarters sent out. So that was in the a group, the thing that I sent out most recently. It's a Qualtrics survey, and that is for members and fellows only. So those two classifications. Are there any additional comments? I was wondering if folks who were heading to ECAD would be at all interested in having a pre-CAD meeting online, just so that we can connect and figure out who's going to be where. Okay, I see it. Thumbs up. Okay, I will seek that, and maybe I can figure out, because I suspect more people are going than are in the meeting right now. Trevor, we've got a fairly big group, but the meeting people tend to be a smaller but more kind of dedicated, enthusiastic core. So
it helps if you all stay in the same hotel.
I don't think that's likely to happen at this point, just because things are filling up, but it's a good idea. All right. Are there any open comments? Anything that anybody else would like to talk about while we're here?
Just a quick note, Dina, in case anybody's gonna be in New York, March, I think it's March 9th. Chris Nicola is putting together a Tales from Dark Places event. So it's all about caves and stuff. I'll be speaking kind of towards the end. But it's a really great group of folks. Bill Steele, Jane Kretcha, really cool speakers. So thought I'd mention it in case anybody's gonna be there.
That's great. And you're one of the featured speakers, right? Do I
Yeah.
have that? Yeah, that's what I thought. It's been a while, because I remember you sent me something, but I had my conference in the meantime, so the brain is not working anymore. But I'm glad you brought that up. Hopefully, if folks are in New York, they'll connect to you. And Paul, go ahead.
I just wanted to say hello to. This is my first time coming to a Great Lakes chapter. I'm a proud Minnesotan, and retiring from the Army and moving back to Minneapolis over the next year. But until in the interim, I'm often in New York. So if anybody ever comes through New York, I'd love to meet up with you, especially around the club.
Very cool. And I just want to say too, please do not hesitate to use the Google Groups messaging just to reach out. I know sometimes people are a little concerned that it feels like spamming the entire group, but it's really a good way for you to connect. And then you can, when you reach somebody, you can, take it off the group chat, but it's a good way to reach out for any activities or plans or an event that you know about or a meetup, anything like that. Please don't hesitate to use that. And thanks again to Tim for setting up the Google Groups. All right. Well, I think maybe we can wrap this up. Thank you all for coming. Thanks again, especially Trevor, for being here. Very much appreciated. Happy travels on your upcoming journey, and same for everybody else as you go from place to place on this planet. And I'll be in touch online. Oh, Harsh, hi. It's like fun to see people.
Thanks for putting this together as always, Dina, and
Yeah,
thanks,
thanks,
Trevor. And see you next time.
All right.
Thanks,
Bye,
Dina. Thanks,
everybody.
Trevor.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
Take
Bye.
care.
Bye.
Hi, Jeff.